the Radio Today podcast with Jen Saderhelm.
Hi and welcome. The first GFK Radio 360 survey of 2025 is out, and in this special podcast episode, I'll share with you the winners, losers, cumes and DAB Plus results. I've just finished reading an article painting a bleak picture for Kyle and Jackie O in Melbourne, but I don't think Survey 1 was that for them at all. I'll come back to that though. In Sydney, 2GB is the number one station, just ahead of Smooth 95.3. Ben Fordham is number one for GB on breakfast. Kyle and Jackie O are number one FM. Smooth's Bogart, Torelli and Jonesy and Amanda on Gold 101.7 saw the biggest losses, and the biggest gains were for Triple J off the back of the Hottest 100 and for Nova 96.9, bearing in mind that Kate Ritchie has been on personal leave from breakfast with Fitzy and Wippa since early February. Mark Levy, who took over from Ray Hadley on 2GB mornings when Ray retired last year, held on to number one spot there too. Melbourne, 3AW is a long way ahead at number one, and for Ross and Russ on breakfast. Number one FM breakfast belonged to Christian O'Connell, who was up most of all and overtook Fifi Fev and Nick at the Fox and Jase and Lauren at Nova 100 along the way. RSN 927 apparently will not feature in GFK surveys in 2025. Radioinfo and Radio Today has reached out to the station for comment. In Brisbane, B105 retains number one overall and on breakfast. Marto, Margot and Dan at Triple M have closed the gap though. Adelaide, Triple M moved further in front at the top, but strangely had a 2.1% drop on breakfast for Roo, Ditz and Loz. I expect that to change when Survey 2 and AFL seasons are included. A massive congratulations to Sonia and Jules on ABC Adelaide breakfast, up 2.8 and going from 5th to 2nd behind the Triple M team. And finally, Perth, where Nova 93.7 and Nath, Nat and Sean on breakfast are as unassailable as Russ and Ross on 3AW in Melbourne. Nath, Nat and Sean were up 3.6% to a 19.8% audience share. 96 FM's Clairsy and Lisa were also up 1.5 to 12.6 in second. Cumulative listening had some surprise results, no more so than for Triple J after their annual Hottest 100 countdowns, and they're held across the Australia Day long weekend. The impact of that countdown saw Triple J Sydney's cumulative audience grow by 178,000, more than any other station. It will be hoped, with a tweaking of how much certain songs are played in a day by the network, that many of those who tuned in for the countdown stick around. The most listened to station is Smooth 95.3 Sydney with some 1.3 million listeners. A recent trip to Sydney, I was aware of hearing it everywhere I went, in shops, Ubers, doctors, hospitals. Across the day it was keeping me company, although Bogart, Torelli on Sydney Breakfast and Mike Perso on Melbourne's Smooth 91.5 did see audience losses. In Sydney, Today FM and Triple M will both be very happy with 100k plus audience growth, which bodes well for their new breakfast teams, although Triple M has already lost Natasha Belling, and in the instance of Today FM, they've also had a format change. 101.9 The Fox FM had the biggest growth in Melbourne, 150,000 plus, as well as a healthy increase for Fifi, Fev and Nick's breakfast show. It took back leadership in the city from Nova 100. Jase and Lauren are still the most listened to, but their 50k drop in cumulative breakfast audience was the largest of all. Interesting that Christian O'Connell and Ross and Russ's audiences must listen longer and be more loyal. The biggest growth in that city on breakfast was for Kyle and Jackie O on Kiss 101.1, and they are still the most listened to in Sydney as well. Nipping at their heels now are Nova 969's Fitzy and Wippa with Kate Ritchie, Nova 96.9 is now the second most listened to station in the country, leapfrogging Kiss 106.5 along the way, and the second most listened to breakfast show. Elsewhere, while it wasn't directly shown in the all audiences share yet, this was an excellent survey for Nova 106.9 in Brisbane. It had the biggest cumulative audience growth, with the station now being able to say it is the most listened to overall and for breakfast. Nath, Nat and Sean on Nova 93.7 in Perth, as mentioned, continue to dominate. Their cumulative audience is just a shade behind Jonesy and Amanda's on Sydney's Gold 101.7. To DAB+, digital radio listening at the start of the year is quite different to other times, as it incorporates parts of the school holiday breaks and long weekends where people listen for longer over car trips and all-day events like Double J's reliving of the hottest 100 of 2004. Each state's results in GFK Radio 360 Survey 1 of the DAB Plus audience are quite markedly different, with some standouts that are contrary to fears about local music listenership and radio's role as a source of discovery for new music. Sydney's results are quite astonishing, actually, with an additional cumulative audience of just shy of 250,000. Most are aged 25 to 39, but there was healthy growth in 10 to 17 listenership too. They are listening across the day and on weekends, and particularly during the morning. For the first time, iHeart Australia was the number one DAB Plus station in Sydney, just beating Kate, who also saw growth. iHeart Australia plays only Aussie music and plenty of new stuff. Kate is the home for new and breaking music. These two results should give hope to our music industry. Between Kate and iHeart Australia is Kiss 90s, who literally doubled their listenership. ABC Sport was also up over 100k listeners too. Such was the embrace of digital radio this summer in Sydney that no station struggled, with the exception of Triple M Classic Rock. Melbourne wasn't as enthusiastic about DAB+. Lots of the previous leaders shed listeners, with Coles Radio, Blender Beats and Triple M Classic Rock the most affected. Double J surged, as did TikTok Trending, both in the 25 to 39 age groups, TikTok Trending also in 10 to 17s. People were not as enthusiastic about the cricket in Melbourne, with ABC Sport halving its audience. Number one in the city and the only station with more than 100k listenership was Gold 80s. Sydney's WSFM 80s has become Gold 80s as of this survey too. Brisbane sees Smooth FM and Coles Radio neck and neck. Coles Radio audience grew over the summer, unlike in Melbourne. Smooth's dropped, and even more surprisingly, on weekends. Close behind the top two is Nova 90s. iHeart Australia is only available on DAB Plus in Sydney and Melbourne at this stage. Smooth FM is also number one in Adelaide, just slightly ahead of Coles Radio and Nova Throwbacks. Mix 80s and Double J were the most improved. Smooth halved its breakfast audience, but a full return to work might see that changed, survey 2. Finally, in Perth, Smooth FM dominated DAB listening, and contrary to Adelaide and Brisbane, grew its audience. It has double the listeners of any other digital station, with the exception of 96 FM 80s. There is a new digital station from the Capital Radio Network this survey, Forever Classic 60s. To have discovered this little gem, you will either be a listener of 6IX or will have stumbled upon it while surfing the dial. That 10k plus have found it, first survey, bodes well. Survey 2, a second station, Forever Classic 70s, should also debut and potentially steal from Smooth's dedicated audience, or perhaps simply entice more people to listen to digital radio in WA. And that's a wrap of Radio Survey 1. Full survey details and all the spin can be found on Radioinfo and Radio Today websites and socials. I'll catch you next week.
Radio Today with Jen Saderhelm. Find more at radiotoday.com.au.
radiotoday.com.au.